Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome to my Tiny Talks podcast, the show where we'll dive into self-love, inner child healing, and discovering your soul's purpose. I look forward to chatting with you every single week and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's Tiny Talk. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to another episode of Tiny Talks. I know I always say that I'm super excited to come on here, and that's because I am always excited to come on here, but especially today. And I'm especially excited to come on here today because today's topic is something that I am not only extremely passionate about, but I have seen time and time again how bringing awareness to this one subject really can transform our life. And so today I really want to talk about our younger self, so your inner child, and how our younger selves might be actually holding us back presently in this moment, as well as how our childhood experiences and things that we went through as a child could still be affecting us to this day. And so I'm unsure of how old you are or what your age is when you are listening to this podcast, but regardless, we all have a part of ourselves that is younger than who we are today, that has in some way, shape, or form shaped into who we are today. And so kind of the preface of this episode is that we often grow up into a teenager and then into adulthood and then into the next phase of our lives, and we forget about our younger self that still lies within us. Because if we think about any experience that we've gone through, there's been something that has shaped into who we are today, even starting off as little as being a newborn baby into, our younger self as a child, learning how to speak for the first time, learning how to eat, learning how to move, learning how to navigate. And this podcast actually surfaced for me when I was watching my nephew learn how to crawl the other day. And it just sparked something in me of recognizing that we all start all at the same place, yet as we go through life and as we all have different experiences, they all shape us into the unique individuals that we grow up to be as adults. And oftentimes when I look at folks around the world, when I'm out and about, I often get that weird thought in my brain of, we were all just once babies learning how to navigate this world. And now look at us all doing different things. So that to me just shows that we all go through different things that put us on different paths. And I think that is absolutely incredible and amazing, and what makes this experience on Earth so unique. But the thing about that is we often forget to recognize that we all weren't given the same starting points. We all maybe weren't given the same resources and advantages in life. And that could be on a socioeconomic level, that could be on an emotional level, whatever it is, we all go through different experiences that shape into who we are as adults. And I think the more that we can recognize that, the more that we can not only bring awareness to ourselves and validate for ourselves the things that we've gone through that shape us to who we are, but also for us to be able to have that self-compassion for other folks that maybe they have gone through something that has made them into who they are, whether that be quote unquote positive or a negative trait. And so it's so important that we do the work to ask ourselves in every situation, whether you're triggered by something or something bothers you or irritates you, are you responding appropriately in that moment based on what just happened? Or is it possible that you are acting out of a way that maybe your younger self, your childhood self would have reacted to keep you safe? And so I'm going to give you an example, a personal example of how this comes up for me pretty often. So for me, a huge trigger that just really disrupts my system is when somebody speaks loudly, speaks at me, or is basically swearing at me. Basically, when someone just really is loud and talks directly at me, it causes me to instantly go into a freeze response. Now, even in looking at that, some folks you can probably think of when they're in those situations, they're the opposite. They go into a fight response. When someone challenges them, they want to challenge them right back, right? And again, that's often something that's rooted within them from childhood. And for me, whenever someone yells at me, like I said, I go into that freeze. I get quiet. I feel like I can't speak. I'm so dysregulated. I feel out of my body, almost like I'm looking at myself from a movie. And the thing about this is it does often interfere with my personal relationships, with my friends, with work at times. And the thing about this, and like most triggers, is that person that might be speaking loudly to me might not have a malintention. Maybe that's just how they're speaking. Maybe they're just super excited. Maybe they are a little frustrated, whatever it is. And we often don't recognize those other parts because our body just recognizes that that loud voice or that attack is something that we need to protect ourselves from. So we instantly go into a survival state. And the thing about this is that might have worked for me at one point in my life, that I was able to just run to my room if I was scared or wanted to be by myself, or going through my college experience where I had a coach who was very emotionally abusive and would very much yell at me directly, call me names that would cause me to shut down. Now when that happens, I instantly go into that. But we need to ask ourselves, when we get triggered, is that trigger correctly identified with the person who is now causing me to be triggered? So what I mean by that is, if I now have a partner who speaks in a louder voice to me, is that appropriate for me to act the same way towards them as it was maybe towards somebody else? And this is a very minuscule example, because when I go quiet, technically I'm not causing any harm. However, if this happens at work, for example, that could also come across as really unprofessional. If I'm unable to speak my truth, to stand my ground, and to seem confident in what I'm saying. So we can really see here how when this happens, we are taking those childhood experiences and we are bringing them into our later life that can really begin to affect us. And so it's important to ask ourselves if we're still reacting in a way that our inner child would have responded, or if it's just working to protect us in the meantime. And so when we recognize that we're triggered or we've gone through something, that is indeed the first step of overcoming any kind of trigger or thing that we've gone through. And the thing about our younger self is we might not remember every experience that we've gone through. I mean, I sure as heck don't remember every single time that I was triggered or thrown off as a child. But the thing is our body often does remember, and it can remember triggers physically in the body more than we can in the logical part of our brain. And so it is important that we take the time to dive into our younger self, of what we've gone through, experiences we've gone through, how that might be playing into our adult life, so that we're not only able to interfere with those to correct them, but also to help heal our younger self of whatever it is that they went through. And so a huge part that I want to share with you all today is very much mental health related, and a tool and a resource that I use personally in my life, but also something that I like to share with friends and family, but also something that I used to use in my position when I was working at a sexual assault healing center. So this is something that I would oftentimes give to my clients to do with them to get a better understanding of experiences that they've gone through. Because if we think of where we are right now in the present moment, we might not be able to identify why it is we think the way we think, why it is we respond the way we respond, why it is we do things the way that we do things. But oftentimes if we pause and we do a little bit more of that deeper digging, we can often find answers or something lying within there. And oftentimes it is our childhood self that comes up. And I also just want to highlight that the reason that our younger self often comes up and we remember things more when we're a child is because that's when we are learning to navigate the world. We are learning what is safe, what is unsafe, who are safe people, what are unsafe people, where are safe places, right? We're starting to navigate the world. We're building our resiliency. We're kind of testing the waters. And so when we take those risks as children, and that's either taken away from us, or we didn't even have the ability to have those experiences, or when we tried to have those experiences, we were shut down, or we were bullied, or we were neglected, or there was domestic violence, whatever it is, it can really disrupt our mind's ability to not only grow into the best version of itself, but also to learn how to tend to our emotions and to calm ourselves down. And so bringing awareness again to our inner child self can be something that could potentially be triggering. So I just want you to know that if you are listening to today's episode and maybe you do recognize that you had a harder childhood, or you know right off some triggers that are coming up for you, if you're noticing anything in your body right now, I do just recognize and encourage you to continue listening to this episode with caution, or if this is too overwhelming for you, please tune off, as I do want to recognize and highlight that sometimes even just talking about our childhood self can potentially be triggering and overwhelming, and it can take time to get to that point. So if that is happening for you, I do encourage you to take a step back and tend to yourself, and maybe reach out to any kind of mental health professional, a friend or a family, if you are needing that support. So in saying that, the next thing I want to dive into is, again, that resource that I like to use time and time again. And you may have heard of it before. However, I wish that this was something that was taught in our school system. And the reason for that is because I think that when we're able to fill these gaps from a younger age, when we grow older, we often have those gaps already filled. And so this is something that they like to refer to as an ACE score. So basically it stands for an adverse childhood experiences. And it's a score, it's a series of 10 questions. And these 10 questions kind of vary. They're kind of surrounded by common traumatic experiences that would occur in early life. And since higher numbers of ACE scores often correlate to challenges later in life, including higher risk of certain health problems, the quiz is intended as an indicator of how likely a person might be to face these challenges. Because if we think about the body and trauma, as I was talking about fight, flight, and freeze earlier, anytime that our body is overwhelmed or it has to go into a state of survival, we're actually kicking our whole system into high gear, meaning that everything is working that much harder, meaning we're going to be extra tired. We might have more aches and pains. We might be more irritable. We might be less present. We might get triggered easier. So even thinking back to in school on those days that you had a hard day and you just had a hard time concentrating, even now, every day in life, we're human. When we get overwhelmed, our brain likes to go offline to keep us safe. But when we're younger, and if we lived in a household where domestic violence was present, or emotional abuse, or sexual assault, or poverty, or hunger, or anything that you can think of that would disrupt your body's normal rhythms, you can see how our body being kicked into overdrive can really set up a child later in life to be fearful of the world, to have more triggers, to be more easily set off. And that often leads to a trickle-down effect of, okay, we're starting with this amazing, beautiful child who has gone through some things. Their nervous system is extremely fragile. That might lead to other things. So maybe scaredness of going to school, which then leads to falling behind in school, which then leads to being labeled as this, that, and the other. And then their identity is that they are less than, which then pushes them to not want to go to college, university, whatever it is. So we can see how very early on in our life, we really can be set up. I don't want to say for failure, but I'm going to say for setbacks. Because I think even if you have a 10 out of 10 on your ACE score, you are still a beautiful, capable human being. You've just gone through some stuff. And it is going to be a little more challenging to navigate and to come out of that. But with the right support and awareness, I think that we are all able to get back on the right track with that mindfulness and that time. It takes time for our bodies to come back from that. But this ACE score really does give us that snapshot number of how things that we've gone through may be affecting us still to this day. And so, kind of like I was mentioning, the quiz is a super helpful tool for raising awareness about the potential impacts that the score can have on your body. But one thing that this score doesn't do, because even like I mentioned, it's only 10 questions. 10 questions really is not enough to highlight any and all the experiences that we can go through as a child. So there's a lot of things that it doesn't take into account for. So there's a lot of experiences as a child that could be quote unquote traumatic, but it doesn't ask about that. So for example, community violence, racism, other forms of discrimination, natural disaster, housing insecurity, bullying, anything like that, it really doesn't ask about that. But the thing is if we look at the definition of trauma, it's anything that overwhelms one's ability to cope. And so anything that overwhelms your system as a child or growing up, that overwhelms your system and puts it into that overdrive, would be considered as a traumatic event. And so with trauma, it's what we call big T's and little t's. So a big T for something traumatic would be like a sexual assault, would be getting into a horrific car accident, would be going to war, basically those big things that we think of. But one thing that I do always like to highlight is if we have a bunch of little t's, so let's say again, that housing insecurity, discrimination, racism, violence, bullying, just being talked down to, if we have a bunch of those little t's, one on top of another, to me, that is almost just as, if not the same level of detriment as one big traumatic event that can happen to us. So I do just like to point that out because I hear people say time and time again that, well, my trauma is not really a trauma because John Smith over there had this horrendous thing happen, so how can I even compare myself? And I think that I hear that a lot, and of course I can validate that because I truly believe that that is taught to us from a young age, that if we are still breathing and we are still okay, then who are we really to complain about things? But I think the more that we're able to just have that compassion, even in adulthood, if you had a bad day, telling yourself that it's okay that you had a bad day, but how can I make tomorrow better? And it's the same thing with our ACE score, right? If we think, well, my childhood wasn't that bad, and I personally don't think my childhood was that bad whatsoever. I had very loving parents. I had a home. I had food in my belly every night. I had a warm bed to sleep in. I had all the boxes that one would check off to say that you were going to grow up to be successful. However, there were a lot of hidden experiences within that really did disrupt my system growing up and moving forward, that I don't want to forget about. I don't want to minimize those, because in doing so, our younger self has already gone through that once. And by disregarding that for ourselves, we're almost putting our younger self through that again, of saying, you were just supposed to go through that. That's just what made you who you are. And we're not validating for ourselves. And that's the beautiful thing about when we grow older, we're able to tend to those parts of ourselves when we were younger that maybe weren't tended to when we were younger. Okay, and so the thing about ACE scores is that 1 in 4 adults report having at least 3 or more ACEs. So that to me tells me that if 8 people are sitting in a room, at least 2 of those people are experiencing at least 3 out of 10 check marks on that ACEs score. And if you are wanting to do this ACE score yourself, and I definitely encourage everybody to do it just to see what your score is and kind of where you sit, I will put a link for it in the show notes, but it's also super simple to just Google ACE score, do the test, dive into your younger self, see what comes up for you. You really might be surprised at what comes up for you. And again, the thing is that no matter what age you are, knowing your ACE score might help you give your younger self that self-forgiveness that you maybe weren't able to get from others when you were growing up. And I do recognize that although we can't go back in time and change those experiences that we went through, the same as we can't change anything we've gone through in our life, we can begin to look at it through a different lens. And we can begin to be mindful of how those experiences we went through have shaped us into who we are today. But also a huge thing when it comes to our ACEs is that we can refrain from passing that on to future generations. So intergenerational trauma is basically unhealed trauma from one generation going to the next. And this typically happens when there is either the same issues happening over and over again. So if we think of residential schools, for example, that was passed from one generation to the next, and that is still being dealt with to this time. And that is a very larger subject in and of itself. But just to give an example of how residential schools have now shaped the identity of a lot of Indigenous folks to carry all those labels. And it's the same thing if we downscale that just to our own families. What did your great-grandma go through? What did your grandma go through? What did your mom go through? Has that been passed down to you in any way, shape, or form? Can you see patterns when you look at those older generations and yourself? Can you see how that might be passed down to us? So I definitely encourage you to do that ACE score and just sit with yourself of how that feels to get that number. Does anything come up for you? Can you recognize how maybe your younger self shows up day to day more than you ever recognized? Can you find the time and the capacity to be gentle with your younger self when you're triggered, to give yourself that hug that maybe you wish that you would have got in that moment, or to feed yourself when you're hungry if maybe you didn't have that capacity when you were younger? So I wanted to end off today's podcast episode with a super quick meditation. And the reason that I want to do this is because I do recognize that although this is a subject that I'm very passionate about, it is also something that's very hard to talk about and to bring awareness to. Because oftentimes folks that do have a higher ACE score, and that number I said, the 1 in 4, I do suspect that that actually is a lot higher. We oftentimes just suppress the things that we go through. There's a lot of shame that surrounds it. We also can block out parts of our childhood depending on experiences that we've gone through, and this is something that happens subconsciously, so we might not even remember some of the things that we've gone through. It can be too overwhelming for our mind to bring up again, etc., etc. So you can see how there's just lots of things that can really pile on top of this. So I wanted to close with a meditation for us all to just take that time to honor our younger self, because we all have a younger self. If we all have one thing in common, it's that we all started from the same place. And so I definitely encourage you to close your eyes if you have the capacity to do so, as long as you are not driving or doing anything that requires you to have your eyes open. But I just encourage you to close your eyes for a moment. And I encourage you to picture your younger self. And oftentimes we'll have a picture that comes up for us pretty instantly of our younger selves. And for some of us, we might be 2 years old. For some of us, we might be 6. For some of us, we might be 8. Whatever it is, picture that younger self. What is that younger self wearing? What is your younger self doing? Are they at home? Are they at school? Are they at a friend's house? Are they at the movies? Where is your younger self? What's their facial expression? We can really dive into maybe how they're feeling. What are they going through on this day? And now that you have that vision in your mind of your younger self, I want you to maybe think of something that you didn't receive as a child. And I don't mean physically like an item. I mean, or it could be, but I want you to think more emotional level of something you didn't receive. Maybe it was validation. Maybe it was encouragement. Maybe it was strength. Maybe it was nurturing. Maybe it was a hug, support, love, comfort, safety. What's something that you didn't receive as a child? And I want you to honor that for yourself. Honor for yourself right now, that thing that you didn't receive. And even I right now, as I'm sharing this with you, I have my arms crossed, my right hand on my left shoulder and vice versa. And basically what I'm doing is I'm giving myself a hug. And this is a great self-soothing technique that we can do while we talk to our younger self, as we're able to comfort ourselves, because we are that person and child that you are thinking of. That is you. They're within you. Your heart beating is their heart beating. Your brain is their brain. Your feelings right now are their feelings. So tend to that. Hold yourself. So what were you needing and what did you not receive? Is that something you're able to give your younger self now? Is that something you have the capacity to even give yourself right now in this moment? The more that we're able to give ourselves those things and release and heal those parts of us, the more that we're able to again release and let them go. Because yes, they will always be a part of us, but we can reshape our brain to view those experiences as less painful or less hurtful as we grow older and have the capacity to do so. One thing I do find helpful for these exercises is to look at an old photo of yourself. Sometimes that can be helpful to get clear visualization of what you may have been experiencing at that time. And so whether you have your photo or you're still thinking of your younger self in your brain, I want you to repeat these mantras to yourself. I forgive all past experiences. I forgive all past experiences. I'm sorry if you never got what you were needing. I see you. I am you. I love you. I'm sorry if you never got what you were needing. I see you. I am you. I love you. You are so loved and accepted just the way you are. You are so loved and accepted just the way you are. I forgive you for any and all mistakes. I forgive you for any and all mistakes. I love you, and I'm so glad you're still here. I love you, and I'm so glad you're still here. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And I just want you to notice what comes up for that. These are sentences and mantras that we really should be telling ourselves on a daily basis. But what a great place to start is with our younger self. Healing those past parts of ourselves that deserve to have that validation and love in order to, I don't love the word move on, but to release to make room for new. Because those experiences will always shape us. Things that we've gone through will always shape us. That's the inevitable. However, the more that we're able to release and heal and move on and find space and love and open those hurt parts of us and flip them into caring, loving, nurturing parts of us, again, not only are we tending to our own heart's needs and desires, but we are then able to radiate that onto those that are around us. And so I just encourage you to be kind to yourself after this episode, to tend to yourself, whatever it is that you're needing. I have my inner child essential oil here. It is one of my absolute favorite essential oils for emotional support. Essential oils in and of themselves are incredible for emotional support and for feeling grounded and giving us that higher vibration when we might be feeling a little lower. Find those things that you need to help up your spirits and fill your cup and fill your soul. I'm sending each of you so much extra love. I'm sending your inner child, from my inner child to yours. I'm giving you a big high five, a big thumbs up, big rock on dude, whatever it is, from my inner child to yours. I just want you to know that you are accepted, you are safe here, you belong, you are always welcome. I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen and for honoring yourself and your emotions, because I know that that can be one of the hardest things that we do as human beings. But the closer that we get to that healed version of ourselves, or the more work that we do, one step closer we are getting to being the optimal, highest, loving versions of ourselves. And that to me is such a beautiful journey that, again, won't happen overnight. But the more that we continue to put one foot in front of another, the more momentum we are getting to that next version of ourselves. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning into this week's episode. I truly felt this on my heart, and I truly hope that this spoke to yours and was maybe something that you were needing and deserving to hear. I hope you all have an incredible day. Please go tend to yourself if you are needing so. And if you are needing any support, like I said, please reach out to a mental health professional, friends, or family if you are needing that extra love and kindness, which we are all always needing. I can't wait to talk to you guys next week. Bye. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of Tiny Talks. If you're looking to connect, you can find me on Instagram at JessieBrown13. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.